Well, hello there everyone! If you've been on the internet and play video games for any moderate period of time, you probably know the meme about how a boss can be hard as hell when you fight them, but when unlocked as a playable character they kinda suck. But does that have to be the case? No, not at all. And for this video, I wanted to talk about what I consider are 10 of the best examples of boss fights that are also playable characters that live up to the hype and challenge that they provided. The only real rule here is that they have to be playable in the same game that they are a boss fight. If that means if the means of playing them is added because of DLC, an enhanced edition, or a remake, so be it. Temporarily playable characters are also allowed, but it is preferred if they can be played for the entire game once unlocked. I don't want to bore y'all with a long intro, so let's go and get into it. Number 10, Akuma, Street Fighter II. What better place to start this list than with Akuma, originally the secret boss at the end of Street Fighter II Turbo that players could face off with after beating many opponents on a single credit, or basically beating story mode without losing, and given that his introduction was him absolutely wrecking Bison's shit, you could guess he's a pretty tough fight, and sure enough, he's basically a supercharged Ryu that's able to hit like a truck and expecting the player to know what they're doing. But you could play as him by inputting a special code, and he worked by being a serious powerhouse, but was balanced, or at least attempted to be balanced, with low HP. Any mistakes made could prove costly, in a way making him an ideal choice for a skilled player, so long as they never messed up. Nowadays, Akuma is not really a secret or a hidden boss at all. Everyone knows about him, and everyone knows that when you play him, he can be an absolute monster to deal with. But that doesn't mean he's bad. In fact, he's actually quite fun to play as, and he's quite fun to play against, at least in most of the Street Fighter games. Ultimately, I think he's a good starting point for this list. Number 9, Ragnarok, Mega Assault 1. Okay, so this one is a little bit weird since it's technically not a character, but a mech, but also shut up, this is one of my first video games and I want to talk about it a bit. The Ragnarok lives up to its title of the Endbringer between his Gauss rifles, long-range missiles, and his exclusive weapon affectionately known as the lava gun, on top of the strongest shield in the game, straight up stopping damage, except Warhammer missiles I guess. Now, the fight does actually get slightly easier though, if you can outlast his heavy firepower, because the Gauss rifles and long-range missiles will slowly but surely lose power. The lava gun, on the other hand, not so much. But even with that overtime weakness, it's still going to be a tough fight fitting of essentially this game's final boss, and while he's nothing compared to things I face today, this guy was impossible for 5-year-old me. Heck, I don't think I actually beat this game until I was 13, it was my dad that beat him. Which, kind of inverse, the sequel, where I had to take over for my dad to beat the final boss, which was kinda cool. But when you beat Ragnarok, you'll find there's actually a second one in the wreckage, and you get to pilot it for the final mission of the game. How strong is the Ragnarok? Well, first off, it's one of only 2 mechs in the game that's classified as an assault mech, and second off, this is a Mad Cat, a very strong heavy mech with good stats all around and generally one of the best mechs in the game. He's dead now. Also, I gotta give a bonus point for Strader's death scream. He was V2 snailed 20 years before Armored Core 6 came out.
You have not won. I will still destroy this world. See you in hell, Strader. Sorry, sirs, couldn't help myself.
Number 10, Anima, Final Fantasy X. About 1/3 of the way through Final Fantasy X, Seymour will show his true colors as the main antagonist of the game, and we get a battle against him, and after taking him down to half health, he'll summon out his own Aeon, Anima. We've seen her some throughout the game, and she is a mighty foe with her 18,000 HP and the signature move Pain, which is pretty much guaranteed to one-shot a character 99.9% of the time due to its insane damage and its high probability of inflicting instant death on the target. And her overdrive is also absolutely terrifying and will pretty much wipe out the unprepared party. Aeon Shield for the win. Now, on a normal playthrough, that's where Anima's relevance ends, but for those looking for completion, if you've finished all the Cloisters of Trials and get the special items from them, you'll be able to obtain Anima as your own Aeon. But she's not just an Aeon, she's a final Aeon, meaning the summoner sacrificed someone they held dear to create an Aeon strong enough to defeat Sin. And while Seymour never finished his journey because his mind basically broke after having to sacrifice his mother, Anima is more than strong enough to live up to her title, and is by most accounts the strongest Aeon in the game, not used for cheese tactics, with you able to deploy all of her powers just like Seymour could during his first boss fight. And it feels like a proper reward for finishing all the craziness that was the Cloisters of Trials. Thankfully though, Bavel's was impossible to miss because if it was, I think most people would never get Anima. Number 7, Meta Knight, Kirby Superstar Ultra. I was thinking about it and really there wasn't any game I could think of off the top of my head where Meta Knight was playable but then also a boss fight. But then I remembered the remakes. Both Superstar Ultra and Nightmare in Dreamland, and I've talked about him before, but I think Meta Knight is the best boss in the original Kirby Superstar. His combo variety, awesome music, and the intense setting of the halberd crashing into the ocean makes for a high-stakes but satisfying battle, and an easy but heart-pounding second phase where you have to escape the exploding halberd on Wheelie while Meta Knight is determined to send you to the bottom of the ocean. While this would be his final appearance in the original Superstar, the remake, Superstar Ultra, gave us a handful of new campaigns to play, including Meta Nightmare Ultra, where you're able to play through basically the full game as Meta Knight, and slice and dice your way through the game with all of his abilities, plus new power-ups like Heal, Night Call, which gives you your helper for his mode, Meta Quick, and Mach Tornado, all showing off the power of the Elder Star Warrior, and making for quite a fun side mode to get you ready for the end of the game and its challenges. Number 6, Toll, Ys Origins. Toll is a boss that you fight only twice in Ys Origins, as he's exclusive to Hugo's campaign, which means a lot of people may not even see his battle. But overall, he's actually a fun and decently balanced boss, with him being able to use the 3 elemental vessels just like Hugo and Unica do. Meaning, he can use Gales to dash around the arena, Fire to create flaming tornadoes to ascend to the sky, and Earth to hit like a truck and call down lightning. Not my favorite boss by any means, but that's more due to my dislike for Hugo's playstyle. He's still a well-designed boss fight. But the question is, how is he when he's playable? Well, to put it simply, he's Wolverine. All the powers he had in his boss fight, he has here, and you can use and abuse them to your advantage by zipping around everywhere at the highest speeds in-game, breaking down the mightiest of guards with your Stormclaws, or jumping a little bit higher with Flame Tornado, which kinda sucks, but it helps for platforming at least. On top of him having his own demon form, just like all the other antagonists, other than Epona, I guess, turning him into Wolverine, well, I guess turning him from Wolverine into just straight up a blender, and he has his own special burst attack that will slaughter basically every foe in the game other than the last 2 boss fights, who still take a lot of damage from it. Ys Origins is a phenomenal game, and Toll is an unlockable character that's just awesome and fun to play as, though I'm glad you only have to complete one story to face him and not both, or that would have brought down the mood a little bit. Number 5, Master Hand, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Master Hand is an iconic boss fought throughout all of the Smash Bros. Games, often being the final boss of the character's single-player mode, though with each entry he's been modified to be different each time to keep things fresh. In this case, creating his own sun in his hands and laser beams from his fingertips, as well as his standard Master Hand attacks you've come to know and love. But as you may well know, there wasn't any way to play as him outside of a glitch in Melee. That is until Smash Ultimate released with the World of Light story mode. Near the end of the game, you have a point where you must defeat 50 characters in a single life, an insane feat that'd be nigh impossible until you realize you get to do it playing as Master Hand. This level is one of the most fun parts of the entire game, and I wish it was turned into a full-blown minigame that you could select on the main menu, but sadly minigames can't really be kept behind story progress in a multiplayer-focused game. Although, I mean, I kind of still wish they would have done that. Whatever. Honestly, this is probably my favorite part of the World of Light other than maybe the Galeem fight. That battle's also awesome, but man was it fun getting to see a childhood myth become fully realized as its own thing. Number 4, Id, Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. You're gonna fight Id multiple times throughout the game, but his third battle in Chapter 8 is where he's pulling out all the stops. Early on, the fight isn't too bad, and is maybe even easy as you bring him down in a 4v1 domination, but then you realize he's a normal dude holding his own against 4. That alone should be a bit concerning, and as his health gets lower, he becomes more and more aggressive, entering overdrive mode and splitting open the arena. But the real shakeup happens when he gets to half health. See, at half health, you're going to quickly learn Id is a child of dragons, and he's performing one of the scariest super moves I've seen in a video game due to just how dang long it lasts. And going forward, you have to contend with a far more aggressive dragon form of Id that threw his humanity to the wayside. Difficulty-wise, he's not the hardest boss in the story, but he might be top 3 with how insanely wide his array of attacks truly is. A thrilling battle to gatekeep the endgame, and all the insanity this game provided, and it also acts as your second major win over one of the game's big bads. Now, for a short period in Chapter 9, and more importantly during the post-game, Id will join you as a party member, and while his greatsword is expectedly a bit on the slow side, he's a lot faster than you'd think, and between his dark element and dragon form, he actually makes for a great team player for anyone ready to tackle the insane number of post-game challenges this game has for you. Overall, I think he's one of the best examples of a boss that's unlocked as a playable character, but we've still got 3 more entries to go. Number 3, Magus, Chrono Trigger. Now time for one of the oldest entries on this list. Magus acts as your antagonist throughout the first act of Chrono Trigger, believed to be the source of Lavos coming to the world. That's not the case, but that's irrelevant for this video because we still got a boss fight with him, and he's one of this game's best bosses as well as probably the toughest one up to this point. Because this is Chrono Trigger, you can't just hack away at the bosses to win, you need to find out the way to beat them, because they usually have at least some little wrinkle thrown in. In this case, with Magus, he has an elemental barrier that he'll put up, making him immune to all magic except for the element he's currently using to attack you with. This means you need to be able to adapt on the fly, and no matter what your team configuration you choose, you're still going to have to take your lumps in some capacity, as he's unleashing some very powerful magic. And he has a second phase where he'll reduce all of his defenses to prepare his ultimate spell Dark Matter, which hits for a lot of damage, to put it nicely. It can be a very challenging fight for new players, but it's still a fun one because no matter your party combination, you'll have options but also drawbacks. Do you bring along Luca for the most coverage but have bad healing? Or do you maybe take Robo for how tanky he is but ultimately his lower damage output? Or maybe do you bring Marl along for the absurdly broken triple tech and giving the party enough healing to keep everyone alive even throughout the dark matter attacks without much issue, but having only ice and light magic at your disposal means that whenever he's going with darkness and fire, you're just going to have to force him out of it and go into something else, meaning you'll have to take more hits. None of the teams are bad options, but none are without their drawbacks either. And should you choose to recruit him as a party member, at the start of Act 3, he shows his worth as the strongest mage with all the elements at his disposal, as well as an insta-kill move known as Black Hole that works on a lot of opponents, including the mighty Iron Maidens, which are basically boss fights. He also has other magic like Barrier, which can reduce magic damage taken by the party as a whole, and an even stronger version of Dark Matter than the one he had in the boss fight because it doesn't lower his defenses, with the drawback of Magus being that he doesn't really work the best with others, having no double techs in the game and only a small handful of triple techs, which pretty much all require the involvement of Luca in some way, which is kind of fitting if you know this game's ending, and also Chrono Cross, but that's its own can of worms that I don't want to get into right now. Regardless, Magus is an awesome example of how to make a boss into a party member without nerfing them heavily. Okay, he does get a bit nerfed, but that's more because of a story reason. And he gets stronger after you train him up a bit. Number 2, Shizuna, Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak. I mentioned this in my boss ranking, but Shizuna is basically a super boss that the game is merciful enough to cut off early. She's one of the strongest swordsmen on the continent, being one of only a handful to reach the rank of Divine Blade, and she shows it off in full force with her mastery over ice, as well as her different sword techniques like Duality, which removes your buffs, Raging Blizzard, which can never miss, and Silver Winds, which not only hits like a truck, but also does so much stun damage that if the target does survive, they'll probably be incapacitated in the process, and they won't be getting back up for 3 to 8 business weeks. Thankfully, she doesn't unleash her S-Craft in this battle, or the fight would have been a lot harder, though she certainly does unleash it in her optional super boss fight. Still, she lives up to the title of Divine Blade. And somehow, not only did she not get nerfed as a party member, she's even better as she takes all of her powers from her boss fight and adds them to your arsenal, doing even more damage than she did as a boss, on top of having new passives like Stealth, which makes her harder to hit, and being a surprisingly great team player, able to support your characters by increasing their invasion, on top of countering attacks even when the target is a completely separate party member from her, as well as her S-Craft, Zareth Gleam, which is one of the strongest and most abusable in the game, on top of looking cool, and we can't forget that she has the special ability to clear an enemy's buffs, which is extremely useful in a game where most of the in-game bosses like buffing all of their stats at the same time. Overall, she might just be the best example of a boss that canonically becomes a teammate I've seen in a video game, but sadly she can be pretty easy to miss, only joining you in Chapter 5 if you fulfill her oddly specific requirements for a very short section of the final chapter, but thankfully she would go on to become a permanent party member in the sequel. However, as awesome as she is, there is one boss that beats out every other entry, and if you've thought about the topic, you've probably already guessed who it is by this point. Number 1, Virgil, Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition. Just because the answer is obvious doesn't mean it's wrong. As a boss, Virgil is probably the toughest challenge Devil May Cry 5 has to offer, being able to not only match Dante blow for blow, but even surpass him with him dashing around the arena using his own devil trigger to demolish said arena, and do a lot of damage while looking cool as hell. And of course, his signature Judgment Cut attack, which Virgil popularized by cutting the air around him so hard that space itself shattered. He's the ultimate test of your abilities, and the game's mark of mastery, being one of the greatest video game bosses of all time. But how fun is he to play? Well, thanks to Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition, we have an answer to that very question, so I'll just let the video say everything for me.
You shall die!
I am the storm that is approaching.
And that's all for this video. I wish I could say this video was an idea I had planned out for a while, but really, it just kinda came to me after seeing the meme for the 73rd time, and got me thinking, what about the bosses that are just that good even when you play them? So here we are. Wasn't exactly a long video, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. That's all I've got for now, and if you want to see more videos of varying quality, consider liking and subscribing, and consider checking out the 2 posted here on the end screen. With that said, the video's over now. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, take care everyone.